So on Monday, we worked with calculating simple interest. Simple interest formula is I equals P times R times T. So what we did on Monday was basic calculation using the formula. First two examples was pretty straightforward, just using the formula. And then the examples 3 and 4, that's when we did a few variations, whether it was having a percent that was already a decimal, or having time that was in months instead of years. So we did a couple of variations. Today, we're going to do some more variations using simple interest. Either finding the total amount, or finding something that's missing, whether the principal P is missing, the time T is missing, or the interest rate R being missing. So if something is missing, we'll look at how to solve those out as well. So we got 4 more examples that we're going to work through today. And all of them will help with the IXL that's due tomorrow and the worksheet that is due on Monday. So let's start with example 5. Example 5, Reggie has $20,000 in a savings account that earns 5% annually. The interest is not compounding. What is the total amount in this account in 2 years? So, key thing to keep in mind, when they say the interest is not compounded, that just means simple interest. Compound interest, we won't get into until the second half of the year. What is the total amount after 2 years? So that brings total amount. So total amount is the principal, which is what you started with, plus the interest that you got on that account. So it's principal plus interest. Principal plus interest. So the principal part, we already know. $20,000. That's what you started with. The interest, well, we have an interest formula to help us get that. So now we got to find the interest. We got a nice little formula to help us out with that. P is the amount we started with, 20,000. R is the interest rate, 0.05. And T is your time, 2 years. So we set it up to plug in just like we did on Monday. 20,000 times 0.05 times 2 is $2,000. So 2,000 is your interest. Add them together, you get $22,000. So your account now has $22,000 total, assuming that you don't spend any of your money. Questions, example 5.
So you have to do the extra equation every time, and what is this?
Oh, it depends on what the problem asks you to do. Sometimes it'll ask you to do it, sometimes it won't. So an interest rate is a percentage. An interest rate is a percentage. Time is how long something's happening. So years, months. And then the principal is how much you're depositing, how much you're putting into a savings account, so on and so forth. So after you read the problem, then you have to look at the context clues in the problem.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So for the principal and interest rate, 20,000 multiply that by the 0.05 and you got that thousand.
You have 20,000 times 0.05 times 2. So you multiply all three of those together.
Okay. And then with the 22,000, where you get that?
You added those two together.
Okay. So that's like the whole answer.
That's a whole problem. So keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, these are not just one-step problems. These are multi-step problems. So you have to pay attention to every single part that's going on. These are multiple step problems. You can't take your focus off for a minute, so you gotta really focus on what you're doing. Especially when one of the parts is missing. So let's look at example 6. Darnell deposited $800 in the savings account with simple interest at a 6% interest rate. If he earned $120 in interest, how long was the money in there? So, how long the money was in there, that means you don't know time. You don't know how long it was in there. So, let's look at the problem. Let's plug in what we know and then solve for what we don't. $800 was deposited, so that means that's your principal. Principal is what you're putting into the account. 6%, there's your interest rate. We'll change it to a decimal in a second. He earned $120 in interest. So there's your interest. So we have what we need to use the formula. So let's plug in what we know and solve for what we don't. I is the interest, that's 120. P is the principal, 800. R is the interest rate, 0.06. Remember, to change a percent to a decimal, you have to divide it by 100. You do not have a choice. You must do that. Just use 6, your answer is going to be jacked.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So when you're trying to find a simple interest, will it always take just the interest next to it, or will it relate to time?
Well, right now, all we're doing is simple interest. We're not doing compound interest yet. Compound interest is second semester. So right now, if you're talking about interest, all we're doing is simple interest. But good question. So the time we don't know, so we'll just put the T back in the problem. So we plugged in what we knew. Now we solve for what we don't. So 800 and 0.06 are being multiplied together. So let's go ahead and multiply those together. What's that multiplied together? 48. So that's 120 equals 48t. Oh, that's an equation. That's a simple equation too. What do you do to both sides?
Divide
By
48.
divide by 48. 48's drop out. So t is equal to 2.5 years. So if he wants $120 interest, he's going to have to wait 2.5 years. Questions, example 6. I'll give you 30 cents. How's that? While she's copying that, let me remind all of you, if you need to see something again, all of these videos are recorded. All these lessons are recorded. I upload them to Google Classroom. Watch it. Rewatching something is free. Relearning something is free. Not doing what you're supposed to do and failing a class is not free, because it's $175 to retake the class. So, be smart about our job. Example 7. Melissa opened a bank account with a 9% interest rate. After 5 years, she got a statement saying that she had $1,440 in interest. How much did she originally put in the account? So, she opened the bank account. Notice, it didn't tell you how much she opened it with, but she opened the bank account. 9% interest rate. So we know we have an interest rate. Yes, Amari? I couldn't hear a word you just said.
So for that percent, that would be the 14. 1,440 would be the higher.
So interest, so 1440 is your interest. 5 years is your time. So if we look at our formula, we have interest, we have interest rate, we have the time, we don't know P. We don't know how much we started with. So let's plug in what we know and solve for what we don't. So I is 1440 times P times 0.09 times 5. Remember, the percent has to be changed to a decimal. If you just put 9 into that problem, you're guaranteed to get the problem wrong. But now we can solve the problem. What can we do with 0.09 and the 5? Alright, so if we multiply it, what do we get? 0.45 times P. $3,200 equals the principal. So she opened this account with $3,200. Questions, example 3. mean, not for example stuff. But, example 8. Trenton's parents put $2,500 in a savings account at the start of his freshman year. When he graduates in 4 years, he should have $3,350 in the account. What was the interest rate on the account? So, let's first look at what they gave you. So, Trenton's parents put $2,500 in the account. So, that's what you're starting with. So, that's your principal. When he graduates in 4 years, so 4 years, that's your time. It should have $3,350 in his account. So that's an ending amount. That's an ending total. So we haven't had 2 figures like that before, but there's a formula we can use to solve it. We'll do that in a second. What was the interest rate on the account? So we don't know what ours is. So notice, when we try to use this formula, I don't know what the interest is. They didn't tell me. So I don't know the interest.
And the interest, that's what's the start off with?
Now the interest is how much money you made from the start, when you started, to when you're taking the money out. So there's a way for us to find out how much interest he made. If you started with this and you're ending with this, there was a formula that we did in example 5 that allows you to answer that. Remember, your total is equal to your principal, what you started with, plus your interest. Principal is what you started with, so that was $2,500. Your total is what you ended with, $3,350. I don't know the interest. But what could I do to solve that? Is that the opposite of addition, division?
You gotta subtract the total from the principal. So you would do like 3350 minus 2500.
Yes, you would. 33, so this is the same thing as solving the equation, 3350 plus 2500 plus x. I don't know what x is equal to. So I'm going to subtract 2500 to figure it out. That's $850.
Why are you subtracting stuff?
Because you need to know how much interest he made. All they gave you was a starting amount and an ending amount. So you need to know how much money did he make. That's his interest. Interest is the amount of money you made off of the account. So you have to figure that out in order to figure out the interest rate. If you don't, and when you try to use that formula, you wouldn't know the interest, you'd know where you started, and told you that you don't know the interest rate, and you know the time. You don't want 2 variables in the problem. You don't want 2 things missing. You only want 1 thing missing. But now that I know that 850 is the interest, I can put in the 850. Any questions before we finish off this problem? If you don't know something, make sure you ask. Because the next time I see you, well, unless I see you at parents' teacher conferences or after school today, is on Monday. So, and you're still responsible for the homework you're about to get in 8 minutes. Let's keep going. What can I do with 2,500 and that 4?
Multiply.
Multiply. That's 10,000. Now what do you do?
Divide by the 10,000.
Divide by the 10,000. So R is equal to 0.085. But we can't leave that because this is an interest rate. Interest rate is a percentage. So how do we change a decimal?
The R.
Huh?
What's the R?
Interest rate.
You multiply it by 100.
So you multiply it by 100. So your answer is 8.5%. If you had just left it as 0.085, yes, you're going to get it marked wrong. So my hope for some of you, especially if you know that you're struggling, number one, if math is the subject you struggle with, then you put in more time with it. You ask more questions. You come in after school. You email the teacher. You have to do that. I can't do that for you. If you don't tell me anything, I'm going to assume you know what you're doing. I get the right to assume that because you're not telling me otherwise. That's one. Two, understand, math builds on itself. So if you didn't get something from a week ago, it's going to show up now, and then I'll really know that you don't know what you're doing because you can't do it in another problem. Don't wait until that point. If you know that you're struggling, ask for help. There's no shame in needing help. You're not expected to be perfect. So, I'm going to pause.